everybody, welcome to my talk today, tips to help you prepare for a UK nurse researcher interview and questions. This talk is for anybody out there who's got any type of nurse research interview coming up. It could also be for a clinical academic internship, for example. Lots of tips, hope it helps, and if you're interested, I also have a book out, How to Prepare for Interviews and Develop Your Career as a Nurse or Midwife, with example personal statements and a lot more advice about career development. Do check out my other videos on my free YouTube channel as well. It's free to subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed the session. So today I'm going to talk through how to focus your background research. Whenever you go for any interview, it's really helpful to use a systematic approach to help your preparation. I'll talk through what to expect during your interview and how to plan for some interview questions, and lastly dealing with some nerves, because we all have them, and learning from interview feedback. So the first thing to think about with a UK nurse researcher interview is to establish what type of interview and the format that the interviewers are using. So check your invite letter or ask the human resources lead, because across the UK there are different employers that will use different types of formats at interview. You might need to prepare for a two-part interview where you have a value-based interview, which I'll talk about later what that is. And then the second part is a typical panel-based interview where you're questioned about the research that's got to be delivered, the skill set that you have, or you may have a presentation to deliver. If you've never delivered a presentation in a nursing interview before, I have a helpful video how to prepare a presentation for a nursing interview on my YouTube channel. It's free, so have a look at that prior to interview, because hopefully it'll give you some helpful tips. So the first bit of background research you need to do for any role is to establish what does this research role or clinical academic opportunity entail, and so that you are clear in what it is you have to deliver as part of an internship or as part of this research project. And if you're not quite sure, or if you want to ask a few questions to clarify, book an informal visit, or you could book an online talk with the recruiters or the research lead. Review the job description, the personal specification and the funding criteria thoroughly, because essentially within those documents is what is the key responsibilities and what you're expected to deliver. Another good tip is to look at the employer intranets. Now, with research roles, they may be joint appointments. They may not just be with the NHS, they may be with a university. But all of these institutions will have information on their websites about research and the projects and what they entail, and also about the research teams potentially that you'll be working with. And if you do need to talk to anybody in the research team, book meetings as soon as possible, because people are extremely busy, and hopefully you can use that meeting to gain some insights ready to prepare for your interview. So you could ask them about the research priorities, the plans, any potential barriers they see to the research, such as recruiting participants, timelines. And then secondly, look at employer, institution or NHS values and reflect on those values. There may be targets within that employer or institution. There may be mission statements. So think about and reflect on what do they mean to you, because you may be questioned about that at interview. What do you know about the institution offering the role or the funding? Now, I'm currently doing a PhD, and one year I received funding from the Barber's Company Clinical Nursing Scholarship. And as part of my preparation, the night before, I actually decided to look into what the company was about, and I was absolutely fascinated because the roles of surgeons and barbers in the UK in the 1300s overlapped, and barbers in monasteries already working with sharp blades began to add minor surgery to their skill set. And this is where the Barbers' Company of scholarships came about, this guild came about. And typically, really luckily, in the interview, I was asked, what do you know about this scholarship and about the Barbers' Company? And I was able to say that I knew this fascinating bit of facts. And I think I did quite impress them at interview actually with that. So it's always helpful to learn about the institution, especially if you are applying for funding. So it could be a charitable fund from a charity such as Parkinson's Disease UK, for example, and what are the main aims of their charity is to have an impact on their on patients. And so a question interview may be on you're applying for this funding, what impact will you have? How are you going to measure the impact of your research? So all of this may come about from the research that you do on that employer or on that institution. It's important to understand key terms and structures when you apply for a role that relate to that role or that fellowship. And I would always start with the job description or the criteria for the funding application and look at the language that they're using and reflect on the key relevant terms, definitions. They might indicate research tools that you're going to be using as part of this study that you're going to be involved with. So for example, what's a clinical trial? Do you actually know what a clinical trial is? What the barriers are, facilitators of a clinical trial if you're applying for a research role that is where you're going to be delivering or monitoring participants on a clinical trial? Study sponsor, research participant, lead investigator, and knowing what the different roles across a research team are, or what an internship, studentship or fellowship actually is. I have a video, different research roles, nurse roles, and how to become a nurse researcher, that indicates some of those terms that you may be asked, and also some academic courses that may help you, so that when you're aligning your career towards research, there are certain courses that may help you in that aspiration. Key research standards and procedures. So in the UK and across Europe and internationally, we will always have research standards and procedures, especially with clinical research where we have patient participants. Good practice guidelines is a course, CPC course, and it's the international ethical, scientific and practical standard to which all clinical research is conducted. And prior to starting my research data collection on my PhD, I had to complete a certificate, and it's free and it was online to complete. There may be EU clinical trials directives that you need to review, depending on what your research entails. National regulatory bodies, there will be research governance and ethical frameworks. So you could have review the NHS Health Research Authority, Research Ethics Service and Research Ethics Committees. And on the websites, the NHS Health Research Authority and the National Institute for Health Service Research, you will have pages and pages of information about research governance and ethical frameworks. Research study protocol. So if you're to assist with an already established project or a project that's already got ethical approval, a research study, you may already have an indication of the research question, the methods, recruitment, data collection, data analysis. So always review whatever information is available about the research. Review local and national standards of care. So although we've got these research governance and ethical frameworks, we have the national health and safety regulations and NHS procedures. You'll have local and national assessments, risk assessments to adhere to, incident reporting, escalation standards and guidance that may be used when monitoring participants or if something goes wrong. Check your local protocols and procedures for escalation, because you may be asked questions with scenarios where something went wrong within a study and what would you do. And so adhering to risk assessment, incident reporting and escalation standards will help you with any sort of question like that. Mental capacity assessment and deprivation of liberty safeguard DOLS, and the Mental Capacity Amendment Act in 2019 is aiming to abolish the deprivation of liberty safeguards. So in the future we may have the liberty protection safeguards that would apply in England and Wales only for anyone over 16. So these the acts and future government acts linked to mental capacity assessment and deprivation of liberty, liberty protection safeguards, always check online for up-to-date practice and guidance. Other topics, roles and responsibilities within the team that you'll be working with, or if you're doing an academic internship, you'll have a support a supervisory team potentially to support you, and what are their roles and responsibilities, and you can always ask or email for clarification before your interview. There may be current hot topics relating to the topic area that you're researching and or area under investigation. You may be doing a literature review as part of a clinical academic internship as an early career researcher. So you might not exactly know which research study you're going to do in the future. You might be looking at scoping literature, but knowing about your subject area or having recently reviewed and analysed a research study in the area that interested you is helpful, because you may be asked to interview. Another helpful thing to do prior to your interview is to reflect on the key differences and similarities between the role you're applying for and your past experience and your current role. Because I know some of you may be students that haven't gone into your first role yet. This might be your first role that you're applying for. And as a student, you're going to have organisational skills, you've balanced workload and placements with your dissertation. So there's nothing stopping you going for research roles when you first register. If you're somebody that's been an experienced nurse or early career nurse, you're reflecting on the experiences that you've developed over the last 4 years. And it's helpful to get those transferable skills across, because you may be asked a question about your transferable skills. And think about what you're expected to deliver in this role as part of the research study. So inevitably, it's about organisational skills. It's about problem solving when things go wrong. It's about organising and managing your time, balancing your workload. These are the key sort of transferable skills. And you'll see the headings in the job description of what they're looking for. So that might help to start you off. Are you responsible for patient assessment, informed consent, data collection, administration of medications, monitoring effects of the research, documenting or leading others in your current role? So have a think about that, and you will be doing the aspects of these roles. There'll be transferable skills that you already have that would inform this role or this future internship. So some simple preparation before your interview. As I mentioned earlier, double check what type of interview you have. I do know people that have turned up for interview that opened the letter to bring them to interview on their phone, and they didn't carry on scrolling, so they didn't realise that there was a two-part aspect to their interview. So don't make that mistake. Secondly, be punctual. If it's a virtual interview, double check your internet connections, and if you have a poor internet connection at home, book a quiet room somewhere else, in a library, for example, or at a friend's house. Make sure you can see your face and that the camera is still during the interview, so that you're not just doing your interview on a mobile phone. You need to fix your mobile phone so that your hand's not getting tired, for example. If you have a value-based interview aims to select individuals who align most closely with the values of the organisation or the National Health Service. Hence me mentioning earlier on to have a look at employer websites for mission statements, for example, and their values. There will be 1 or 2 or 3 generic questions in a value-based interview. So an example may be, give me an example where you led a positive change in practice. Then you will give an example, describing, talking it through, and the interviewer will base the rest of the interview by drilling down on what you said according to your response. So they may say something like, you mentioned that this change had an impact on patient care. How do you know it had an impact? Or they might ask you, how did you evaluate the impact of that positive change in practice? So interviewers expect a relevant example that demonstrates your understanding and practical application. So some examples might be dealing with a challenge or overcoming a challenge that involve problem solving, demonstrating collaborative teamwork with a project, leading a project, organisational skills, and without specific detail your answer will be rated as low. So it's better to spend time choosing and reflecting on some examples before the interview. And I would say, even if you haven't got a value-based interview, it's helpful to have some key examples that demonstrate your transferable skills and to underpin your answers at interview. So when you're preparing examples, I've got a really good video on my YouTube channel, 5 ways to influence nursing practice, that covers these areas, and it will give you some simple examples that may help to demonstrate practical application linked to leadership, management, and organisational skills, improving quality, promoting evidence-based practice and research, teaching, supporting, supervising others, patient education, health education or promotion, and clinical or academic project work. So do check out the video. So what to expect during your interview? So it's usually one lead interviewer who will chair and manage the time throughout. There should always be more than one interviewer to prevent bias. And interviewers will make notes when you answer questions or deliver a presentation, or if you are part of a group discussion, they'll still take notes. Some interviewers mark presentations using a scoring tool or assessment scale as well. So looking at what interviewers are wanting to know, what they're looking for that aligns to their sort of questioning in the interview, that you understand what you have applied for. So they're going to ask you about the research topic or the role that you've applied for, or the research team that you'll be working with, the organisation or the funding institution or the scholarship. How is the role different to your current role? So you can see that the preparation that I told you to look at earlier will align, and you can promote those transferable skills, that you've really thought about what you've done in the past and how it aligns to this role, and you understand what you have to deliver with this role. Will you be able to manage the additional responsibility and achieve a healthy work-life balance? What challenges are you expecting in the role or the clinical academic scholarship, or when recruiting participants, or gaining ethical approval or informed consent, or undertaking data collection? It depends on what the role is, what you have to deliver in that role. They want to know that you have the knowledge and skills to do the role. So do you hold the right values, knowledge and skills for this opportunity? What transferable skills do you hold that will help you deliver? Do you have the potential and willingness to develop key research skills in the future, if needed? Do you communicate and collaborate positively with others or in teams? Can you cope with future challenges, and what will those challenges be? And that's where, if you've gone for an informal visit or you've spoken to people in the research team, you can gauge what are the potential barriers and concerns that may come up in the future, because all research studies will have potential barriers. What type of leader are you? And the third thing, all interviewers have to decide who is the best candidate for this role. So they may ask questions and drill down that could be quite difficult, because many people may have applied for that role and they want to differentiate between candidates. So they may ask on the job description, or talk about key transferable skills, or the research being undertaken. A broad question like, why is this research study important? Or if you're planning a future study, why is the topic area, what influence, what impact will it have on your profession or on patients or on whatever topic it is? But you need to have done some research and background reading. And what potential challenges you may encounter is something that's very important to look at as well, because you may be questioned on that. And it will differentiate candidates for those that have really thought about challenges that might need to be overcome, and how you would potentially overcome those challenges, and the importance of that subject area and that study to the area that you're interested in. A few more generic questions. Why have you applied for this research role and funding opportunity? What led you to apply for a research role, funding opportunity, and what do you hope to achieve in the future? Tell me what you know about this research study, this institution, this team, this fellowship, depending on what you're applying for. Tell me about the patients you'll be recruiting and consenting. The research team, you might be a lead researcher or investigator. The research project you will be delivering. The research governance or research ethics committee review. These sort of questions will depend on the job description and what you're applying for. So you don't need to know all of this for every role, but it'll be indicated in the job description or the academic internship or fellowship that you've applied for. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? What transferable skills do you hold that you can use in this role? Could you give us an example where you have solved a problem in your clinical role, or you've dealt with a recent challenge? And when you're looking at giving an example, explain the outcome, how this impacted on patients or staff. How did you evaluate the quality or the impact? Can you give me an example where you have led a team, influenced change, promoted quality standards, or delivered a project? How do you keep up to date in practice, or how do you deliver evidence-based practice? What research governance standards will you be following? What will you need the most support with if you're offered this role or funding opportunity? And scenario-based questions are quite popular in research interviews, such as, what will you do if this happens? And again, it's dependent on the research study. So an example might be, what will you do if a patient decides they do not want to take part on the morning of the study, and after they have already consented? And obviously, if you look at ethical guidance, patients can withdraw at any time, even if they've consented during the study. So helpful to have a think about some of those generic questions. Dealing with nerves, it's normal to be nervous before or during an interview, and interviewers expect this, and it's the same whatever level of nurse you are. So just let interviewers know if you're excessively nervous, and they can support you. And remember, you've done really well securing an interview. Interviews for research posts are often very competitive, and interviewers are human and they want you to do well, so ask for more time or ask them to clarify a question if you're not quite sure what they've asked you. Key tip, the more you prepare, the more confident you will feel. You may want to use some mnemonics or memory aids in case you go blank, but just do your best and put your interview in context. You can apply again later or go for another research role or fellowship elsewhere at another time. If you're not offered the role, make sure that you request verbal feedback from an interviewer. Employers aren't necessarily obliged to offer written feedback, and ask questions such as how could I have improved my answers, what was my strongest or weakest answer, because it will really help you for future interviews when you apply again. Don't spend time and energy dwelling on what if I did have the role. Just reflect on your interview feedback to inform your future preparation. Write the interview questions and feedback down, as that will help with future interview preparation. And you may forget if you've got a long gap between now and your next interview. It helps to book a mock interview prior to your next interview if you can secure somebody senior to do that, as long as the person offering the mock interview is not on the interview panel. That is perfectly ethical to do. And importantly, I would say start aligning relevant courses, research courses and modules that will really help you in future interviews. And often, if you're not offered, interviewers will recommend certain research courses and certificates and modules. So the key tips to success: align your past and current experiences to the role that you're applying for. Allow time to prepare for your interview. Never presume the job is yours. Ask for interview feedback if you're not offered the role. And the key is preparation. So I wish you every success in your interview. If you've got any questions at all, put them in the YouTube questions box. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you found this video helpful. There's lots more videos coming out in the future, and you can contact me on my website or DM me on Twitter or Instagram as well. Good luck with the rest of your career.